As much as I know it with my brain and experience, it still amazes me how things quickly change. You ever catch yourself? You know with your mind, you know with your experience, things change and how quickly they can change, but then it just, for whatever reason, you haven't been thinking about it, and it just hits you all of a sudden, wow, things have changed. This time yesterday, I would hope that many of us were outside. It was pretty. It wasn't cold. There wasn't snow. There wasn't ice. There wasn't bad wind. All the things that we were saying several weeks ago that we can't wait until a day like yesterday. And then you wake up this morning and it's cloudy and it's rainy and it's going to be, storms are headed our way. And just sitting there this morning with our time change as well. And looking out at the pitch black at 7 o'clock this morning, and yet it just hit me how much things had changed. I'd gone outside, let our dog out, let him roam around the yard, and it just hit me that not 24 hours ago how quickly things were, and then how quickly they had changed in just that short amount of time. The psalm that we have been reading all morning is a psalm about change. And not just any change, but unwelcomed change. Change that comes into our lives, or the lives of our family, or the lives of, or the life of the church, or just in general, and it's unwelcomed change. And what the psalmist is going to do is put us in a position to kind of confront the thought that the change that has come our way is not just the most unwelcome change, but it has shaken us to the core. It's the worst thing imaginable. It's kind of the frame of mind from the psalm. It starts off in verse 2 where the psalmist says that we won't fear, and then he goes through the worst things imaginable, even though the earth is giving away. Even though it's not that it's shaking, it's just giving away. It's starting to dissolve and shake and tremble, all of that. He says, even though the earth gives way, or the mountains, they're moved into the heart of the sea. They go into the deepest, darkest part. Or, if they're not moved, they are at least trembled. Many of us are preparing to go to the beach as the warmer weather comes our way. What about the waves that crash? What's relaxing to us on one day when we hear the waves crashing? You put it into the context of a hurricane and it's a completely different thing. Waves crash in a completely different way. It's the worst thing imaginable that could happen in your life. It's the worst thing imaginable that could happen with your family. It's the worst thing that even if literally the world is not giving away, your world is giving away. The ground beneath your feet isn't just shaking and it isn't just trembling. It is literally opening up and it's throwing everything into chaos. So in everything into chaos. And there is no feeling quite like the helpless feeling, isn't there? There's no feeling quite like the helpless feeling. And that's what this verse is about. And what happens for us as we're reading this earlier this week, or at least what should come to our mind is, then what are we to do when everything falls apart? What are we to do when the last thing that I woke up expecting to happen, happens? What do I do when it takes everything apart? It's like the patient who got a call and said, I need you to come in. Your test results have come in. So he goes in. The doctor says, I've got bad news and I've got worse news. And the patient just says, all right, it is what it is. Just let me have it. The bad news is that you have 24 hours to live. Okay, well, what's the worst news? I should have called you yesterday. You've probably heard that before. But has your life ever changed like that? I know it kind of lightened the air, but do you know the feeling of that phone call? Do you know the feeling of sitting on the table You hear the news, and that white paper that they have over the examination table, it just gets louder because it's more and more crinkly, because everything is just kind of zeroed in. I've been there. I'm sure you've been there. You know, all of this happens to us, and we just want to know, what do we do? I mean, if the earth is giving away, there doesn't seem like much can be done. And actually what Psalm 46 does for us is actually it says yes, but you got to be willing to do two things. And I have to be willing to do two things. One, hear and accept the invitation of Psalm 46. And two, adopt a daily posture of Psalm 46. Everything about this question and what's happening in our lives, or what will happen, or what has happened, will depend on two things. It will depend on two things. Will we hear and accept the invitation of Psalm 46? And will we adopt the daily posture of Psalm 46? The invitation of Psalm 46 is the well-known verse of verse 10, but it's the latter half of that verse, and that's where we're going to start. God just simply says, I know we could go in our mind and it's a be still, but know that I am God. Know that I am God. And I went through this earlier this week, and I had originally a plan when I was putting this together that I was going to walk through this question, because Psalm 46 seems to answer, well, who is God then? If you want me to know who He is, well then who is He? And Psalm 46 answers that question in a couple of different ways. He's the Lord of heaven's armies. He's the Lord of hosts, is how our more traditional translations will put it. But if you have a New Living Translation, He is the God of heaven's armies. He's called the God of Jacob, not once but twice within the psalm. He's called a refuge and a fortress, a strength and a help. I like this at the very end. He's very present. He's not just present, but He is very present. And my original plan was to walk through these briefly with you. Until Wednesday came, and it was time to start putting pen to paper, because I write everything out. And I had seen it, but I never really paid attention to it. Why is He called the God of Jacob? We've already had Abraham. We've already had Noah. We've already had Moses. We've already had other significant individuals. Sarah. Hagar showed him tremendous faith to be able to see God and call out to Him. We've had significant individuals. Why not Isaac? I mean, after all, he's kind of helpless. He's going to be offered by his father. Why the God of Jacob? And I just never paid attention to it. And then I thought on Thursday, I kind of put everything together and I came down here to practice. This room is full of Jacobs. That's what my mind came to, that the one standing on the stage is a Jacob, and this room is full of Jacobs, and the overflow is full of Jacobs, and an hour and a half ago all the classrooms were full of Jacobs, because we all have Jacob within us. And he should be fresh on our mind because of our reading from about a month or so ago. We're all Jacob, because we all struggle and wrestle with God. The entire psalm is all about control. The entire psalm is not just about control, but then who actually is in control. Paying attention to the news and obviously hearing the things that are taking place in the Middle East that's not new under the sun. But here we go again. You know how many times I just listened to a 30-minute program? I subjected myself to it. I'm going to listen to this. Over 23 times I heard the word control. Control of this, control of that, control of this, strategic control of this, etc. You kind of get the idea. And just because this was fresh on my mind and I knew where we were going to go in the direction of this lesson, that's all of us. We kind of feel like as if we're alone in our quest for control, but we all are on the quest for control. I want things to go my way. And I struggle with that, but That's Jacob in me, and I'm pretty sure that's Jacob in you. Jacob wrestled with God for over 20 years because of who's in control. He just doesn't wrestle with God for one night. He wrestles with God for decades. Who's in control? That's why Jacob constantly comes up with all kinds of plans, if you remember. It's plan after plan after plan, and they succeed until it comes to that one plan that doesn't succeed, and he's tested. Who actually is in control? And the bigger question, who's been in control all this time? The psalm is an invitation to come in and recognize who is in control, and even more than that, would we surrender to that control? Would we surrender to Him? To know that we are in the midst of wrestling and struggling, and the whole idea from God is, will you just let go? I know the earth is given way, but who do you think made the earth? I know the waves are crashing. Who do you think told the waves to crash at the very beginning? I know the mountains are trembling and maybe even being threatened to be picked up and moved into the deepest part. Who do you think put the mountains there in the first place? It's an invitation to recognize who's been in control all along. Who's sovereign? And there's only one who is sovereign. Is it possible that the reason why things are so overwhelming is in part because of our quest for control? And so we find ourselves in a day-to-day struggle and wrestling match to finally let go. Jacob had his doubts. Jacob had his questions. Jacob, one of the reasons why he continued to wrestle for control is that he just wasn't quite sure if God would. And then you can fill in the blank. And again, this is over decades. This is decades. I would love to meet the person here who woke up this morning with no doubts. Because I'm standing up here before you with questions. Myself. Jacob had his doubts. Jacob had his struggles. Jacob had his questions. And Jacob had his moments where he wondered if God, and then you can fill in the blank. And sometimes he voices that. And sometimes he doesn't. But his life reflects that. And then I realized that it's the most important part. It's the God of Jacob, because Jacob is more imperfect than any of the others that had come before him. Now, I'm not saying that Abraham or Isaac were perfect by no means, but your grandfather is the father of the faith. Your father showed his exemplary faith by following his father. And you schemed your way into a birthright and you've been on the run for 20 years. There seems to be a divergence of the legacy. We wrestle with that. We wrestle with that. The God of Jacob comes in and he says, I know you're imperfect, and I know you're in a wrestling match with me, and I know you have your questions, and some of them over the course of time will be answered, and some of them won't be. But over and over and over, the one who says, know that I am God, is patient with the Jacob who wrestles one day, questions one day, and knows that he's imperfect the next day. And he's patient with the ones, all of us, who are Jacob in our own way, because you woke up with your own wrestling match. But you came, and I'm glad you did. You woke up with all of your questions, and you have your doubts, and you're wondering when, and you're wondering why, and you're wondering if God will, and you fill in the blank, but you came. And you woke up, and you looked at yourself just like I did, and you saw all the imperfections, all the mistakes, all the holes that you dug yourself, all those things, and you know what? You came. And you came because whether it's an acknowledgement or not, the God of Jacob is the God of, and fill in your name. He wants you to know. He wants you to know, yes, I am the God of heaven's armies. And yes, I'm a refuge, and I'm a fortress, and I'm a very present help in time of need. I'm all of these things, but I'm more than anything else, I am your God. Just know that. Just know that. And if it takes us, like Jacob, 20 plus years it takes us 20 plus years. And if it takes us a lifetime, it takes us a lifetime. Because God is infinite. And He knows we're works in progress. Will you accept that invitation today? Will you know God before you leave here? Which means that invitation is dependent on the posture. It's just 2 words. Be still. Be still. It's the words that Moses told Israel when she was at the Red Sea and Egypt was behind her. Mountains were on the left and the right, and the Red Sea was in front of her. She's hemmed in. Where do we go? Moses says, be still and watch the work of the Lord. Jesus, as we've seen not once or twice, but gets into boats. He loves boats. You notice that? He loves boats. And apparently He likes boats and storms. But He tells the storms to be still. Israel is still, and the sea is divided. The disciples finally get still, and the storm stops. The posture is to be still. If I know that He's sovereign, I can be still. If I know that He's never lost control in the first place, I can be still. I can cease wrestling. I can cease striving. I can cease being busy trying to fix everything. I can cease all of those things because the most important storm to quiet is the storm that's inside of us. And that's the words, to be still. That's why we began the entire service with be still and know that I'm God. It was the posture. And so I'd ask you today, what's the thing to let go of? What do you need to stop wrestling with? What do you need to just let Him be God and you be you? He's got a good track record of being God. And I know you're watching loved ones maybe slip away to a very dreaded disease. You're watching children walk away or have walked away. And there's nothing. Everything in you is screaming to do something, but there's nothing that could be done. I know that you're tired of watching wars and rumors of wars and the fluctuation of this economy, part of the economy, and that fluctuation, and what are we going to do here, and what are we going to do next? I know you're tired of probably all the doubts and all the other things. And sometimes God does bring peace to those things, but the most important place that He brings peace is to our hearts and our minds. And it's about being still. And the posture allows Him to do His work. The posture of being still. And if you got to remind yourself that He's got this, that's okay. If you need to write it on a sticky note, if you need to put it in your phone, and you need to say, I need a reminder at 11:30 a.m. every day that God has this, that's fine, do that. Because He does. So one of my favorite authors, and maybe for some of you, and we'll close with this, I don't know how familiar you are with her, Corrie ten Boom. One of my favorite quotes is just simply this. She says, there is no panic in heaven. God has no problems, only plans. And it's my favorite because of the first part. I don't know what the plans are, and I know we're more focused on the last part, what those plans are. I like the first part. Because when waves crash and mountains tremble and earth gives way and phone calls turn life upside down and the last thing that could happen has happened and the last thing that you needed to happen has happened. And all of this is bubbling up, and it's fear, and it's anger, and it's doubt, but most importantly, it's in this moment, it's panic because what are we going to do? Because that's the language of panic. I just love being reminded that there is no panic in heaven. Think about that for a moment. There's just no panic in heaven. So this morning, will you accept the invitation to know that I am God? If you want to know more about this God, let us know. We want you to know Him. But even more importantly, He wants you to know Him. So if you're ready to know more about Him, it's a room full of people who would love to tell you about Him. If somebody has been telling you about Him, and today's the day to do what our new sister did last week and put the Lord on in baptism, it's a great day to do that too. If today's the day to have the posture just to simply be still, even though we're going to be standing, if that's today, it's a good day to do that too. Whatever it is, this is the Lord's invitation as we stand and sing.